Hey, James.
What's up, Chris? How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. How about yourself?
Not too bad. I see the Chucky doll in the background. I'm having
Well,
nightmares already.
getting ready for that time of year. So Halloween's a big holiday in my house.
Yeah, same here. Like it's incredible how big it gets. Like it's and the catcher for me is storing it all year long. And then like, hey, where are the skeletons? Hey, where are the rats? Hey, where are the bats? I'm like, I don't know, you
Well,
know.
this guy hasn't been out since last year, and we just got a Great Dane, and so he's frightened of that thing. Does not like Chucky one bit. So
I
it's
can imagine if I
yeah,
barks at it and
just randomly would come in the office when I have the door open and would just start barking at it for no apparent reason. It's
it is pretty creepy. In fact, I have a 14-year-old daughter. She was just watching it the other day, and I was like, "Are you really watching that?" I mean, it's pretty
which one
dated,
was
but
she
it's
doing?
gosh, I can't remember. I walked by. It was the most recent one, actually.
Okay, the
Yeah.
TV show that they're doing that
No, it
version.
was one of the films, one of the where there's probably six of them now, isn't there? Or five?
Something like that. Yeah, that
Yeah,
sounds right. Three, and
yeah.
then there's the original three, and then there's three. No, four afterwards. I guess there's seven. I think
Oh my
if you don't
gosh, what
count
a
the remake.
franchise!
Yeah,
Who knew? Who would have guessed?
I certainly wouldn't have. And as they went on, they somehow got better. It's that to me at least.
Well, I think I've seen that happen a lot in our genre stuff. Is that once it makes some money, they put more money towards it. It's like it's not so much a one-off. I shot a movie called Annabelle.
Yeah, yeah,
We
yeah.
did it for like, I don't know, I want to say like 10 million or something. And
Oh my God.
I think the next one was like 50 million was the budget, and as soon as they start making money, then they start putting more money into them,
I
rightfully
can't.
so. I mean, it's a viable,
I can't believe
endeavor.
that film was shot for only $10 million. It looked fantastic. I mean, I
Yeah.
just you're doing period at that kind of scale and everything you were pulling off in that film at a very what would be a small budget for a studio picture like that is
Yeah, it was
opening on
pretty
3,000
small.
screens. That's
Yeah, it did
crazy.
really well. I think it made like $256 million or something like that. I'm like, where's my check? Doesn't work that way, unfortunately.
Oh no, not for DPs, unfortunately.
No, I
But you've
know.
been involved in some of my favorite genre work of the last 10, 15 years.
Oh,
You're
cool.
yeah, so stuff that I think specifically the stuff you've done with Mike Flanagan falls under this category of I just stopped trying to prejudge his material. Right. And
Yeah.
I think that probably happened with Hush, where
Hmm.
it's just a home invasion movie. Okay, I know what that's going to be. I get that. I've seen that before. It's fine. And then just knocks it out of the park in a way that it shouldn't work. The Ouija movie should not work the way it does. Taking The Haunting, both those series, they're wonderful.
Yeah.
Midnight Mass, the boat sequence is probably, I think, one of the best moments in television of the last 10 years, and that says a lot. To me, that was an Emmy worthy performance in that particular scene.
Kind of got snubbed at the Emmys, but Mike he brings a real cerebral approach to it all. And I think he's just super smart and pretty creative, and he digs his heels in. Like he fights for what he wants, and like Hush, we did that for I think it was under $1 million. It was very small, very intimate. It was my first project with him. I had done The Bye Bye Man with his producer Trevor Macy, and we did that in 18 days in the woods in Alabama with like one set. Super. And Kate Siegel, she
Life, yeah.
carried the whole thing. I mean, she did all her own stunts. By the time we were finished, she was black and blue, and but it was a really cool family film, like in terms of the process. It was really tight, small crew, and we had a really good time. We shot all nights. I think there's only one day scene in it. We started that day at like 6 p.m. and the rest was all nights. And we fought the sun coming up a lot, but it was a really good experience actually, and it kind of launched Mike. I mean, they started taking him seriously from that movie on, especially Netflix.
Oh yeah, the Stephen King adaptations that he's done. Again, it's just that like Gerald's Game. If you've read that book, that's an unadaptable book, and yet he
Right.
found a way into the material. He actually
Yeah.
did an amazing job. Doctor Sleep, same kind of thing. I know he's probably not the type that would say it, but I feel like that's one of the rare examples where it's a film that made me appreciate a book more that I didn't really care for in the first place. That I was kind of middling on it, and it gave me a new insight to the book that I didn't have before.
Yeah, Stephen King's an interesting cat, like who because he kind of handpicks the directors to
Mm-hmm.
the movie versions of his books, it's been interesting to see him have other relationship with other directors and how those, like Dr. Sleep didn't do that great at the box office, but I think it was pretty well critically acclaimed. And it's funny, like, especially post COVID, like, what is the formula for making money, And I'm constantly blown away by the genre fans and how supportive they are. I mean, both critically and financially, and it's funny because everyone always talks about, oh, like this is a new thing, horror movies, and I've looked back, I'm like, oh, not really. They just start calling them that. I mean, Hitchcock. I grew up watching, oh my gosh, my brain just left me. What was the TV show, with Twilight Zone. I grew
Twilight
up
Zone,
watching
yeah,
Twilight
yeah,
Zone.
sure.
Those are
My
awesome.
6-year-old just started watching it. He's interested in it now.
Those would be
And
considered genre movies. I mean,
oh, for
Jaws
sure.
would be considered a genre movie. Talk about a monster, it's a monster movie. And so now it's funny to hear all these people talk about, oh, it's a new thing. And it's not really, it's just we put a label on it now.
I feel like we're finally past the point where they're calling it elevated horror, which is something that
Mhm.
always really bothered me. It's just, oh, you're giving it a name to give an excuse for this thing that you like, that you've always put on the side. And you've said, no, that's kind of, this is exploitative, it's garbage, kind of, this is trashy stuff. We don't take this seriously. Then if I wanted to start taking this seriously, I had to give it a different name, and it's, no, I mean, there's so many different shapes that horror comes in. And really, if you're looking at something like the Babadook and you need to give it a different name to be comfortable with it, okay, but it's still just a
Right.
horror movie at the end of the day.
And I mean, look at the literature throughout history,
Oh,
like
of course.
in the
Well,
Bible alone.
for sure. But with Midnight Mass, this is something that is, I feel like it's both at the same time not for me, but completely for me at the same time, where it's just this thing that it's, I'm 46 years old. So this is right. This cultural references of this show are completely where I land. Um,
Right.
but it's something, this kind of Are You Afraid of the Dark-esque storytelling thing that I never really, that wasn't a show that connected with me when I was a kid, but there's a way in here and connecting that to the importance of storytelling. I know I got the screeners yesterday, so I've only been able to watch the first 2 episodes, but it feels like it's built towards this idea of just culturally and the way that we've evolved and how much that is tied to our storytelling and how important that is to the human experience. And I think that's a really smart take on this.
Well, that's exactly what, so the B stories that these kids talked about and told in the Midnight Club, that's exactly how we discussed and approached it, was like, what material would these young adults draw from in the 1990s to help, explain their stories or visualize their stories. And a lot of it was just iconic movies from, the 80s and the 90s mostly. And, we referenced a lot of that stuff. A little bit in tone and style, a lot of it in aspect ratio, surprisingly enough. And
Explain how so.
well, we just kind of wanted to really define some of the inspirations, and in there you start to look at different movies and they all have different aspect ratios.
Mhm.
And some of them are period. That's what was the norm with the technology. And then some of them were also to like widen the scope of what you see on the screen, so you can put scary things in the corners and that kind of what you don't see kind of stuff in terms of limiting the aspect ratio. So it was a conversation. So we had to assign, and a lot of it too, I think, was the pitch to Netflix, is they really wanted to know what we were doing, because we were all over the map in terms of looks for the B stories. And we had to kind of explain like, well, this B story was motivated by, the potential movie that the kids would reference in their story. And so then we had to kind of go a little bit deeper with that. Well, that was shot in 1.8.5, and that would use a lot of, saturated colors or desaturated colors, whatever the case was for each B story. And so that was a lot of the clerical work in prep, was defining, what we're looking at in terms of inspiration. But I think that you're right in terms of like, looking back now on stuff that we just don't necessarily know we were inspired by because it wasn't cognizant, but it just sort of seeped into our, into our language, if you will, just by being exposed to it through osmosis,
No, that
And I
makes
find
perfect
myself too,
sense.
I'm not very good at encyclopedic. Like I'm not great at referencing, especially actors and things like that. But I find myself oftentimes knowing what somebody's talking about or referencing something that I never knew I really knew, but it was life experience that stuck with me deep down in there, you know. And when we talk about that kind of stuff, oh yeah, like in this movie or like in that movie, like let's do a camera move like that, or and I think it's fun to pay homage to all those kind of things. Like, you know, there's purists say, oh, you're ripping that off. I'm like, oh, hell yeah, but like everything's been already done. It's how you tweak it, how you apply it, what, you know, parts you cherry pick. It's like, you know, yeah, chefs have been using paprika or salt and pepper forever, but that doesn't mean that, you know, they haven't come up with their own creation using the same ingredients. And that's kind of what we do, really.
Absolutely. I agree 100% with that. And there's some references here that feel overt, and there's other ones that feel very subtle. Like when you have Heather sitting around a group with a group of kids and they're having a therapy session, I mean, that feels very much Nightmare 3 to me, that's what that pull is, that there had to be some awareness of it. But that's also something that's not distracting, that if you've never seen Nightmare on Elm Street 3, that doesn't matter. It's not going to take away from that. I think it's just something that the right kind of references like that, they are paying sort of dividends to the people who know the thing, but it's not, you're not feeling like you're being left out of something.
Yeah, you're not shamed for not knowing it.
Exactly.
You know? And it's also funny too, because like I have my 14-year-old, they said, and even she's a big Stranger Things fan, and like some of the songs will play and she'll start singing. I'll sing along with her. She'll, how do you know that song, Dad? I'm like, oh, that song was when I was in junior high. Like that's a 1980s riff. Like, really? And a lot of these things that the new generation isn't really aware of, that, you know, we use them as references. That's what we grew up with, you know, and that's just becomes part of our lexicon, right? It's like, you know, like that's what we just know. And but now it has skipped a generation. Everything is so secular, and I heard that growing up. But now I get to see it in my house, from music to wardrobe to like dance styles to hairstyles. All these things have come around full circle, probably for the second time. I'm 53, so it's coming around for the first time I was there. The second time I kind of didn't pay attention, and now that it's in my house, it's the third time, you know. And it's really, I'm like, shit, I should have saved all my bell bottoms, or, you know.
There's things that I never thought I would see come back. It just does that. When I saw people wearing fanny packs again and the mullets back now and these kinds of things, I'm like, I'm done.
The 80s were pretty bad.
It was bad the first time around. And that was something that I'm whatever. It's fine. They want to grab onto that. That's great. Good for them. But I'm not getting back on that train again.
I mean, we didn't know any better. They should know better. You know, like somebody already told us that is, you know, terrible. Like for me, like I go to buy clothes, and all the shorts are super short again. And I'm like, that was great when I was 19, but you know, I can't wear those things. You know, but that's all there is out there. It's funny. They don't. Very funny. We're totally digressing here, but like,
no, it's fine.
I wanted to create like a men's line for like men that drink beer and eat ice cream, and like, you know, I want to kind of hide it, but it's not out there.
Well, it's like, you know, apparently cargo shorts are back again. So who the hell knows at this point? If you just stay exactly who you are, eventually it'll come back around for you. That's the only lesson to that.
They can save a lot of money too.
Exactly.
I know. I mean,
just stay comfortable.
Just getting used to skinny jeans, and now it's all back to like the baggy stuff from the 90s.
Oh God. I don't think I'm getting a pair of Jinkos again. That's not happening.
God, no. Where are you? Where do you live?
I'm in Tucson, Arizona.
Oh, okay, cool. And has that a COVID thing that you kind of work out of your house now? Or is that always how you are?
That's been the last 3 years. I've been working remotely, and it looks like that's what I'll be doing from here on out. That's just going to be the new norm at this point. Right. That the office is gone. So there's the upside is all the stolen time with my family, and then the downside is just the time that I would use to commute to work. I need to rebuild that back into my schedule. I was good at that at the beginning of the pandemic, just going out, taking a walk in the morning and taking one in the afternoon.
Oh, you mean like for mental, like just you're driving into the office and you're in your own space and you can kind of decompress or whatever?
For both sides. When I have a day at work, if I'm, you know, you need time to get your head around it before you are talking to your family. And, you know, you're getting the kids ready, doing everything in the morning, getting ready into that day. And it was good to have separation between that time and starting your work day. Yeah. So it's learning how to segment all those different pieces. It's just need to be more aware of it.
Yeah, and the transition, like you don't go from making breakfast to go sit down right into a meeting, and
exactly,
and you don't get to center yourself, and that's really interesting. Yeah, I know
all
I'm
those
guilty of
kinds of
that when I
things.
do a job like out of town, even if it's a commercial, something like that. I'll usually stay an extra day and just like, turn on the air conditioner, pull the sheets up, close the blackout curtains, and just have a little bit. Because otherwise, I come home and it's like, honey, 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 daddy, 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 and like, I'm exhausted from the job, and like nobody is good there. If I take a little bit of my own moment, and then I can hit the ground running at home. So it's really interesting to hear somebody else say that, especially in the application of working from home. Like that's
Well, it's literally exactly what you're talking about when I have to travel for work and I'm coming back and you have that moment that you're talking about. That's, you could catch a red eye home. There's that one last flight that you get, you could be home, you could be in your own bed. But what good are you doing at
exactly.
that point? What are you bringing home? The dogs are going nuts at 1:30 in
Yeah.
the morning.
Yeah.
Everybody's woken up. You've disturbed everybody, or you actually just sleep in, take a reasonable flight at a good time, and I think everybody's much happier when you do that.
Can you write me a note for that, by the way, so that I have it in my, you know,
If you'll reciprocate it and send it so I can
yeah,
show
deal.
it to my wife, then we'll work it
Absolutely.
out. Okay, perfect. And so to kind of bring it back, something you were touching upon, the multiple looks of this, and again, just only getting through 2 episodes, but there's these in the second episode, the number of palettes that you have here that you're playing with. There's kind of the way that you shoot the house when they're all there, and then there's also the sequences that are these kind of nightmare when there's this presence around them that's in
Mm.
that reality. Then there's the storytelling element of it, and even within all of those there's different styles. So I mean, there's, in that one episode, there's the sepia tone background that's a nightmare sequence. There's these things that are very realistic that are playing in shadows, and then you have the two Danas sequence, which is, I
Super
felt like that
cool.
could have been its own film. That thing is
Yeah.
amazing.
Oh, and so yeah, so it was really a lot of fun. For me, variety is the spice of life. And like I always feel very fortunate with these anthologies I seem to be able to get on. And even Haunting of Bly Manor, I had a black and white episode, we had different locations. So there was a lot of variety there as well. I just finished American Horror Stories, that was anthology. So every episode's different. For me, I feel very fortunate to be able to do that because it keeps it fresh. You're not matching stuff continuity that you might have shot months ago, which can be, tedious and somewhat challenging, like the seasons change and now there's leaves on the trees and there wasn't, and just all kinds of little details that you don't think about with continuity that make it really hard to keep it, consistent throughout a whole season. So it was really fun to have all these different looks. We did a lot through lighting, and a lot through lensing. Like I carried different lenses for and set the tone for the other cinematographers, Michael Fignori and then Corey Robson, who I've worked with a bunch. And the idea was that we would keep it fairly consistent, lensing for the A story, and that's the story of the young people, in the hospice convalescing, or I guess they're convalescing. They're sort of waiting to die in a certain
Yeah.
sense. So that was fairly consistent, absolutely consistent with the camera language and the camera setup. Like we used the Zeiss Supreme lenses, but then the candy shop was opened up for all the B stories, because not only did they have to be completely different look than the A story that runs through the season, but every episode has a new B story, and it was really challenging to figure out ways to not overlap, or because I think it was important that the viewer knew that it was a fantasy, or at least a story that was being told, and then and not have them overlap, because oftentimes the storyteller was the main character of the story, as you'll see if you get a chance to dig through the rest of the season. So and it was really fun because we had the license to, like when Mike and I were talking about, I was like, what do you what do you want to do? I'm like, let's push the envelope, like let's make this really as stylized and as edgy as possible with all those things. I think the writing supports it. I think some of these young actors really came to the table, and the two Danas one, Ruth
Oh,
Cobb.
they both crush that and are playing something so wildly different than what they're doing in the other parts. Like that made me reevaluate what I thought of that actress. That it's, oh no, we're operating on a whole different level. So she's the real deal.
Well, and it was a bit of a discovery. So this was her first acting gig. And Mike kind of discovered her. She was like I could be using the wrong term, but she was, one of the first influencers. And she had a big following on YouTube, and she actually is an amputee. in real life. So for her to play the two Danas and stuff like that, she had to play as if she wasn't. And so that was challenging for
Wow.
her. And she just every day worked her tail off, never complained. It was really refreshing to see a young person um, who didn't have any acting experience really embrace it and grow so much right in front of the camera and right in front of us, you know, and it was awe-inspiring, to be honest with you. And I think she nailed it all the way through the season. And Mike has had luck with sort of discovering people or bringing people back, you know, with Heather Langenkamp for sure.
Oh
Uh,
yeah.
he just has an interesting sixth sense about it. But the Ruth Cobb story is amazing to me, and I'm really excited to see what she does next. And she came over from England or from Ireland by herself, and just really and fought through some physical hardship. You know, I mean, there were some times that she was hurting and didn't say a peep. You know, and it was up to us to kind of see it and be like, okay, why don't we just sit down here and give her a break, or if she can use her wheelchair in this scene or whatever it
Yeah.
was. But she is an amazing find, and I think she just crushed the two Danas. And it was really a lot of fun. Like, you know, I'm always trying to push the envelope, but checking in too. I'm like, oh, is that too much flair? And Mike's like, no, that's great, more flair, you know. And I'm like, yeah. And it's really fun because, you know, I came up in a time when if there was lens flare, you got fired. And nowadays we're just trying to make lens flares and trying to, you know, excuse my French, fuck it up as much as we can,
Yeah.
because we're all using pretty much the same camera sensors. We used to use different film stocks and process it differently. And now everything is sort of along the same line. So as much as we can put our own stamp on it or change it, and we do that a lot with using older glass with character and shining lights down on me. I carry a flashlight with me on set all the time, and I'm just like trying to like get something going, and you know, always hoping the editor uses that part too. I'm like, use that flare part, you know. And so it was a lot of fun, really, trying to make these episodes all look completely different, and I think we got there for sure.
I agree 100%. And it's something that if you're watching it, you're not thinking about it in that sense, though. It's not something that's drawing attention to itself, because it's something that's absolutely supporting what's going on in that moment. It's not, here's a camera move, here's a style that's, we're doing it for the sake of style. It does feel like it is furthering the narrative every time. And, you know, even something when you get a little, there's this amazing thing that the show that has a moment right at the end of the two Dana story, when that comes out and they have the, you know, kind of the end of the story, and one of the people responds to it like, oh my God, you were just telling us more about yourself and this thing, and we know you so much better. And as an audience member, that's what you're thinking. And then the show kind of sticks the middle finger back at the audience for having that revelation about it and for getting it right there. And it's just this little kind of nod in a moment that just, it floored me, man. I was so happy with that moment.
It's so good to hear, because I have not many people have seen the show that yet. So, you know, they've held it back for releasing it all for almost a year since we finished.
Oh,
and
wow.
so it's really good to hear just people's reaction to it, you know, and also it kind of jogs my memory too. It's like, oh yeah, because I haven't seen it in quite some time. And you know, putting all those pieces together. And I also think that sometimes shows and movies are like wine or cheese. Like, you know, the more it sits and the more that you kind of get distance from it, you can have a way more objective perspective on it, you know, than if like, oh yeah, I saw that yesterday. Yeah, it's okay, it's cool. And then, you know, oh, I see something in the background I hate. Where like if I don't see it for a while, I watch it, I don't even see that thing in the background anymore, and I'm more engrossed in the story. And I like it when that happens to me as a viewer, you know. Like, it's hard because I oftentimes watch things from a technical standpoint, and
Of course.
I've gotten better as I've gotten older, where I try to watch it once for the entertainment and then go back and watch, you know, even if it's a reference thing, because like we were talking about earlier, people are always referencing stuff like, you know, like that shot in this. And of course I'm like, oh yeah. And then I'm like, what shot is it? What is that? You know, like I got to look it up. And it's hard to watch stuff sometimes without looking at the technical part. So I really try to train myself to do that, and then go to enjoy it and then go back and pick it apart.
Well, and that's why I'm glad that I only made it 2 episodes in before speaking to you, because I actually want to take my time with this one. This is one that I want to, it's just my age that comes through when I'm really enjoying something, even though everything's accessible, I can watch all of this. I kind of want to just watch one of these a week and sit with it for a little while and come back to it and actually spend more time in this world than just getting through it all in one night and then 2 months from now saying, what happened to that thing again? And
Right. Yeah.
I did that with
Shit.
Midnight Mass also, where I just wanted to spend time in that world.
Well, Midnight Mass is so complicated, and there's so many layers in the acting and the writing. And, I mean, as a recovering Catholic myself, there's so much,
Same here.
yeah, so much subtext and so much meaning and so much like, I mean, growing up in a Catholic household, like it's that would just, and I was fortunate enough to work a bit on Midnight Mass. So many things just brought up so many memories from my childhood and from my experience in the church, which is, I think, different for everybody. And I think we all have different perspectives of it. And some of it was pretty heavy, and
Yeah.
that show's pretty heavy. And I think it's important to sit with it too. And there's, my point being is there's a lot of layers in the Midnight Club as well, especially in the A story, which while we were shooting it, I guess I was so excited by the B story stuff. I didn't always pay attention to the character development and some of the subtext in the A story. And now that I have some distance from it, I really realize how poignant it is, and how kind of sad it is too sometimes. There's some tear-jerking stuff in there.
I'm not surprised by that at all. And that's why I'm not there yet, but I know I had a feeling that's where this is heading. And so, something like Midnight Mass, where I grew up in a small town in Georgia, and it was that element of it, the way that outsiders were treated and the people that were viewed as interlopers, that kind of thing was the thing that connected with me. And just anybody that was slightly different, they were immediately ostracized, and you could feel that pressure of a small community. And the religious aspect of it, I think you could take that film, or that show rather, and make it about anything. You could find a way into that where it's deeply relatable, even if it's not the religious element that connects with you. And that's the same thing I can feel in Midnight Club, is that even though this is about a very specific group of kids, and that there's the B story, as you say, is going to be the candy that gets people in the door to some degree. Like, look, they're going to have this fun turn in this thing, and I'm looking forward to that every episode where they get weird. And then I know that A story is going to be heading in a direction that's just going to kick my ass, and I can feel that coming. So
yeah, well, hopefully it works out that way, because I think that's how it was designed. And it all stems largely from Christopher Pike's books.
Yeah.
Which I think is really cool, because I didn't read them growing up.
Neither did I.
And so I was brought, learn about this whole thing, and what and how many people were actually fans and were touched by his books as a kid, and it was really, it's always fun to learn new stuff. And, I think learning is the coolest part about being alive. And I didn't realize that when I was young, probably not till college.
Yep.
And now, like, and I try to impart that to my kid, and she just looks like me, I'm crazy. I'm like, learning is the coolest thing. You never have to stop. You get to keep learning and learning. And that's what's fun, I think, about the film business, is we're learning about new equipment, and then we learn new stories that have been around forever, because we get engrossed in them as we try to tell them visually. And so there's always new stuff. And I'd hate to compare it to something as important as like medicine or whatever, but it's a practice. Like, storytelling is a practice.
I honestly, I would compare it to that. And if you look at the human history, the oral tradition, that is how we were able to progress. That's how we moved forward. If you look, it's just, this is how we were able to get to where we are. It was through storytelling. It's this something about the way humans are hardwired, where if we tell you to do something, it's not going to necessarily resonate with you. But if we take it and we tell it through, it's like the Mike Nichols school of directing, where he would just tell a story about something in his life, and you approach it that way, and then the people go, "Oh, okay, I get my head around that. I understand what I'm supposed to do with this information."
Wow, parenting notes, keep them coming.
I don't think
right. We don't want to be beat on the head with stuff. We want to learn it on our own, and the best way to absorb it, I think, is to hear a story about somebody else and not about you. Like, and the oral traditions, when you're saying that makes me wonder of how much telephone comes into play through our history, and like how much things change, become more
interesting
stories, and how accurate they are, and then also made me think about all these cultures that relied on that have been kind of wiped out. The Hawaiian culture, some of the Polynesians and the South Pacific, and these people that didn't have written languages so much, or that at least the Christianity kind of try to whitewash. And so a lot of their story, American Native, what do we call it now? The Native Americans, or First Nations, they call them up in Canada, which I really like. They were all traditionally, oral stories and not written down. And the Christian world has tried to whitewash all that stuff. So a lot of stuff disappeared, which makes me sad. I always wanted to do and I think somebody did it. I have a big affinity for the Polynesian culture and have been fortunate to spend some time there. And they have so many cool, like haunted stories with like the night marchers in Hawaii and all
Really?
these ghosts and the Menehune and all these stories that it's so much fodder for genre TV or filmmaking that I always thought it'd be really fun to tap into that and make a whole series of like, it could be kind of, YA and be like Nancy Drew and these kids are in Hawaii, like the Brady Bunch when they find their tiki, and you could make it fun and light too, but you could also
Yeah.
make it super creepy.
It's interesting. I've never heard of that before. I need to look into that a
Look
little
up them
bit
night
because
marchers alone.
the night marchers. Okay. I'm
Yeah.
literally stopping a podcast to write something down right now because I want to actually find out more about
Yeah,
this.
it's pretty cool. So like there used to be these guards that would walk the island and protect it during King Kamehameha's era. And people have built houses in those paths now. So there's all kinds of stories. And I have close friends that have related the story too. They'll wake up in the middle of the night and there's like a big giant Hawaiian warrior sitting on their chest and they can't breathe. And it's been documented a lot. So it's really interesting. Look into it. It's really fun.
I will. I love that. But it's the idea of what you're talking about. It's that Joseph Campbell thing where all these stories from all these different cultures, they're all getting to this innate human thing that we have. There's all these similarities that we have. We're telling all these very similar stories, and we have this different lore. But the fundamental, the thing that you boil it down to, that kernel of truth, essence of these stories are very similar. And there's just something really remarkable about that. And it makes, when you find out these other stories and you find out it's very similar to a story that you have in Christianity and Hinduism and Buddhism. And it's just, there's a universal thing that we see all these differences, but really what we should be seeing are these similarities between each other. And that goes for the storytelling.
Yeah. Well, I think just in life, that would make us more apt to bond and to support one another and really, exemplify that we aren't that different really. And it makes me want to ask you, like, what do you think those similarities are? Like, is it, fear of the unknown? Is it fear of inside your own head? All those things, like what?
The two big fears I think that we all have, if I, just kind of going off the cuff here, it's that something could come into the things that you value, that there's something from the outside world that could cause you harm, be it nature, your fellow man, whatever it is. There's something that could harm your family, the things that you're there to protect, your tribe, your community, your country, your world. And so it's when it's on a very personal, small level, I think the fear is more it's closer for people. And when it starts to get up to that community, city, state, country level, it gets more abstract and we don't see the commonality, we just see the fear. So if I think about my neighbors on either side of my house here, I have personal relationships with them. I have no fear of them, but there could be elements of them that if I took it into an abstract and say, well, this guy on this side, he's a staunch Republican. That's something that I'm really scared of now. So I don't know that I would like these people ever. But I lived next to a guy he's a decent human. He's a good guy. I can see that in his heart. We have very differing opinions about things, but there's that. And so that's one side. And the protection element of it that I think is the fear of the unknown is what that really breaks down to. And then I think the fear of the known is also something that's universal, where it's the world for whatever reason isn't what it appears to be. The children that you have, there's something going on inside them that you don't see, that your love is blinding you, and you don't see that the call is coming from inside the house thing, that it's your spouse, that it's those things. I think that it's the external and the internal, that your own mind is turning on itself. I guess. So I would have to say, what do you think?
That's the part that scares me the most is what humans are capable of and how they can put a certain facade. We're watching Dahmer now, and that's like a perfect example of somebody can appear to be perfectly normal, but there's demons inside them in all kinds of different ways, and so they're unpredictable, and it makes you start to like want to pull back the curtain and everywhere and look at it. Because I kind of came up just happy-go-lucky, everyone's great, and really most people are. But inside, I think we all have a potential of being really, really nasty. And, I mean, some of our politics have shown that. I think some of the global politics in the world has shown that,
Yep.
of course, in contrast with all the amazing giving people who do so much to support each other, but we're not afraid of that.
No, no, of course not. But
And
there's
that's
there's
what we're
some,
talking about, is being of like all this universal fear, and I think that's something that just made me ask you, like, what do you think that is? And I think you're right, 100%.
and there's like one side note that I think is something that's the important takeaway from those Dahmer type stories is the serial killers are from a very specific generation. And it's the generation of people that came back from World War II, their children. That it's all
Hmm.
those people that came back that had exposure to this. They had the Depression, they had World War II,
Trauma.
they had, yeah. And the way that they raised their children and the way that society treated people that were different, outsiders, they created this world. We have very different issues today, but the serial killer thing is not what it once was. It's a
Hmm.
very specific window of time when you had all of those names that we all know, and it's
What
something
about
to
like
look
Jack the
back at.
Ripper, or I guess there's other things that people were like that, like I'm thinking Western stuff, but
Like
Jack.
Ed Gein would be a little bit early for something like that, I guess. But it's when those kinds of patterns I think are important to pay attention to, so that
Interesting.
when we look at it in a society, we need to see, not ignore those kinds of elements. If we see commonality, that maybe it's something we should pay attention to, and that maybe there's something that happened there that we can do better than what happened there. That people might get annoyed with me or think I'm a really bad parent because I tend to be a little bit close to my kids, that I do want them,
Mm,
that I'm very honest with them, that I try to be forthright about things, but I'm also never going to their young side now. So I'm not really sure, but if either of them happen to be gay or trans or anything like that, they full support, nothing but love. That's all there would be there. And Dahmer's generation, that wasn't the case. The world was much harder
no,
for guys like that. And so
absolutely.
what would his life have been if he could have found like a BDSM organization to be? I have no idea.
Right. Outlet for that, or for self-discovery, instead of them trying to suppress it and fight internally. And yeah, no, it's interesting. I mean, as a parent, like being a parent has changed me so much. And I
Yeah.
find myself always thinking about, like, and maybe over analyzing my kid, and, just because I want to make sure, like you said, I don't miss any of those markers. I don't miss any, sign that there's something amiss. I'm not thinking she'd be a serial killer, but something of unhappiness that she could carry the rest of her life, I mean, because that's stuff that we're learning now, that, people carry trauma for a long time and they never get over. And I think there's a huge push for awareness and healing and all that kind of things. And I see it happening more and more. I mean, maybe it's because of Instagram, and it might be the
Oh,
algorithm that I look at, but
no, it's well, all of the social media element, that's something neither one of us had to deal with
no,
growing up. When you were in middle school, high school, college, you didn't, if you had a situation that you didn't like, home was a sanctuary that you could come into, hopefully, if you had a
sure.
supporting, loving home, and you could not pay attention to all the shit that you would hear at school. Now it's there, it's in your face, it's either direct or it's on your phone, and that's just a whole different level of stress that I can't even imagine.
No, and they're finding that people are addicted to it. Like they have to get that dopamine rush by looking at all this stuff and looking at the information. And yeah, we didn't. I think that's we're totally sidetracking, but
Sorry, we're way off, man.
I'm fine with it though, because it all is really, it's what fuels a lot of these genre stories, right? Is some of these things that we initially started talking about, was fear, and where it comes from and how it affects us all. And ultimately, I think that's what filmmakers are trying to tap into when they're making genre material. So I guess it really isn't that far off in terms of the conversation.
No, no,
Uh,
no, no, it's there. Yeah, you tied that together nicely. Well done. But I'm
uh,
so excited for people to start seeing this. I want to hear the conversations that are inspired by Midnight Club, because I think that you guys have done something really special again. I shouldn't be surprised by it, but I'm continually surprised by it. And you guys have a lifetime pass with me. Anything you're working on, I'm on board. So
Oh, I love to hear that. No, and it was really fun to work on too, and working with Mike and his camp. It's super creative, it's demanding to say the least. But it's interesting because his material is also is always really different. And I think people easily find a recipe for success and they stay in that lane, but I don't see that way working with Mike and his producing team. They're all over the map in terms of inspiring stories, and the execution of them are always, top notch. And so it's
Top
great to be
notch.
part of that stuff. And, like I'm still amazed at the traction that Hush gets,
Oh, a friend of mine, I just saw they posted on Twitter, they were rewatching it for the fourth time. So there's so much content. The fact that anybody wants to rewatch anything is amazing. And
right?
you've done, that's a classic one. I honestly think that's one that people rare to make a mark in stream. So sorry. Yeah, I logged into the wrong account. I have two Zoom accounts, and I have my pro one and I have my family one. And so I screwed up when I was.
Well, it's a timer that automatically.
It's a timer that goes off automatically. So I'm so sorry about that.
All
But
right,
you were saying so.
just the the longevity that this work has had, that I've been fortunate to be a part with with Mike and with Trevor Macy. And I think people are going to be watching this stuff for a long time. And I think it's going to touch a lot of people and be a lot of very entertaining for a lot of people.
I agree completely. And it's one of those things where you'll be able to watch these kinds of genre pieces. And I think with the best art, you learn a little bit more about yourself, or you're willing to introspect and take it in and think about your worldview a little bit. I mean, if you look at The Haunting of Hill House, that ending, when I heard that it was based around 6 Feet Under, I wasn't surprised, because I've never seen since 6 Feet Under, a finale that made me cry openly, just weeping like
Right.
I've never had that before. And I've never had that in the middle of something that had that many scares, that I'm looking at that imagery and I'm just weeping while I'm seeing it. It killed me. And so, I'm on board for life.
That's interesting. It's now I'm thinking about 6 Feet Under, and I actually just shot a really small movie in that house that they used.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
In the mortuary home, or
they used the exterior for it, and we actually did the thing in Los Angeles. It's a
what
movie,
was the name of the brood? I can't remember the name of that family. I feel like I should know that. I watched that whole damn series and now I can't remember it.
It's been a few years.
It's been a minute. I was watching that one as it was happening. So
right. No, that's interesting. And it was a really challenging experience. And it was sort of one of those kind of situations where you got a lot of rope to do whatever you wanted to do, as long as it worked and as long as it was planned and executed properly. Episodics are interesting. It's not like a feature. You're pretty much driven by the clock and by the schedule and the days. And so you're trying to make some really cool stuff, but you also have to be cognizant of the time it takes. So it's about planning, making good decisions, and executing as precisely as you can. And always things present themselves, whether it's weather, whether it's an actor. Sometimes I find that actors want to put their own spin on things.
of course.
And so that's time consuming to discuss and change. It's one of the lessons I learned a while back was, we would plan something. I'd lay 100 feet of dolly track. The actor's going to walk here and go up to the window, and the actor comes, they rehearse. They go, my character would never do that. And so I've kind of learned to just wait a little bit, see what unfolds, see what other people's inspirations are, and collectively make a decision on how to move forward. And that has saved a lot of time, a lot of heartache for me. It's an interesting position to be in, because as a cinematographer nowadays, a lot of the job is management. You come up with a concept well before you're shooting, for the most part. And then it's managing those ideas and managing the approach and the schedule and the equipment and the crew. And it, I came up through all kinds of different departments. And I can remember cinematographers walking off and smoking a cigarette and be like, man, the light's not right, and that just doesn't work anymore.
No,
it just doesn't happen. There's 10 other people that are plenty qualified and, and motivated to step right in and start shooting.
Life is too short to work with assholes. That's there's just, I've found in even just the 8 years that I've been doing this, I've seen it feels like there's been a sea change, where there has been it's a much more, I don't know, inclusive, welcoming, just kinder environment. The nightmares that you would hear about sets that they're not as commonplace, that you just assumed that it had to be chaos for anything good to be made. And that just doesn't seem to be the case anymore.
No, I think there's too much at stake. I also think that people don't really want to be around that. And there used to be this mad genius kind of concept where like, oh, he's so difficult because he's so talented or she's so talented that they get a hall pass for it. And in reality, a lot of times I have found that that's hiding insecurities to some degree. And really, it's a lot of fun to collaborate. And I hearken it very much to, I don't get to play sports anymore because like there's no way I'm going to make a softball team on Tuesday at 6. So to
Sure.
me, that is my sport. And it's so much fun to know everybody and know their positions and their jobs and help everybody to achieve, their best work, and the best idea wins. Like I don't purport to know more or have a better idea than anybody else. And so I think it's way more gratifying to have that open, collaborative environment for sure.
Not unlike a director, you get credit for things that you may not have had anything to do with other than just offering input. You'll get credit as a DP for special effects that you maybe didn't even touch. You talk to them about where the lighting is coming from, the color palette, those kinds of things. But realistically, the actual execution of it sometimes is coming from a totally different person. But they'll say, well, it's the director of photography, it's the look, so that's yours. And just
Oh,
there's
absolutely. And it goes even deeper than that. An amazing dolly grip can really
yeah,
change, the camera language, and camera operators who can come up with really cool moves or execute them well and have input, like, hey, I know we designed the shot like this. I'm having trouble, or getting around this banister on the stairwell. Is it okay if we, hinge this way and we use the wall to wipe it? We connect it to, it's like, yes, like, hey, we're back on schedule. The shot's way more dynamic. And so that's the fun part is finding those little miracles every day, all day long as a team. And hopefully, rejoicing together as a team too, because it's not, I think maybe the director and the producers, they set the environment, but it's up to us as a, like it's like in football, the long snapper is just as important as the quarterback and
absolutely.
the tight end. And it's the team aspect that I think elevates everybody's work and ideas. And sometimes you get pushed farther than you would if you were on your own. Like, oh, this is good enough. When somebody says, I really like that idea, but it wouldn't be better if it was this way. Yeah, you're right. It would be. And like, that's just so rewarding. I can't begin to tell you. It keeps me interested in new projects and new people and new approaches to do things all the time. Back to what we kind of were talking about earlier, where it's a practice and you're always learning new stuff. And if you're not, then I can't imagine it being very fun or rewarding.
Well, and there's these new jobs that keep popping up with their importance. For if you look back 40 years ago, it was a steady cam operator. It was just somebody that could actually carry the equipment and move around with it and just even had the basic knowledge of how to use the equipment. Then it became people that could do it with style and the people that were able to execute it and bring something of their own visual language to it. And I think you're seeing that now with drone photography, where it's just everybody started adding drone shots because, well, we don't have to have a helicopter anymore. And all drone photography looked very similar for a little bit, but you're really starting to see incredible drone work now. I mean, say what you will about, Michael Bay's films overall, but there's always interesting photography in them. In an ambulance, there's some wild drone photography.
Yeah,
in that thing,
I just had this conversation with a camera operator friend of mine, and
oh, okay.
Was up over the building and down the other side like 5 or 6 times in a sequence. And I love moving the camera, so I'm always really excited about any new mechanisms that help do that. I think it's important for our audiences. I think they expect it. I think ideally the editor expects it, because I think it's really cool to poetically weave shots together in a nice way, and then stop the camera when it's time to really let the audience soak something in. Or to me, I try to hearken it as to like a ride, and sometimes you have to up the roller coaster, and then you get the zoom down, and then like all the variety of it is a ride. And I hope to achieve that in my work, is to provide a fun experience that is like a roller coaster ride to some degree, emotionally, visually. And I think I've come to really appreciate some of the other aspects like sound design. I didn't always appreciate it. I have
So
to
important.
admit, I'm all about the pictures. Get the boom out of the shot. Now it's like, hey,
Oh, okay. You can get the boom out of the shot. That's probably a good.
well, but I could also help design shots and
Oh,
camera
that's a good
angles
point.
that allows the sound department to get the best sound possible, because you can watch, you could watch them right on cue. No, you can watch
Yeah, they were listening.
Watch a movie that's not shot that well if the sound's good, but you really can't watch a movie that's shot beautifully if the sound is terrible. And so like I'm, again, always hopefully learning and working together as a team so that everybody's work is elevated and you achieve something great. And that's something that, so moving the camera that we're talking about, yeah, it's amazing now what's available. And especially with COVID, I think that really brought a lot of things to the table where people wanted as few people on set as possible. So a lot of things were dollies with a remote head, cranes with a remote head, where you have a dolly grip in there, but you don't have a camera assistant, you don't have a camera operator, you don't have this, you just have one guy on set with the actors pushing the camera around, and now it's remotely operated. And the gimbal technology is incredible out there. It's nuts, and I find it really, really fascinating to see how things are continually evolving. And the lighting now, I talk to people a lot about, we use gels and scrims. And if I wanted to make a change, we'd have to bring a ladder in, and then now it's on an iPad. We can dim the light, we can change its colors. I can wait till we're on the other person's side, dim that person's key down and warm it up a little bit so that when we go back to the other side, it's changed. And it just has really been super fun, and the immediacy is incredible, and the time savings. And I think that the palette has grown so much because now we're dealing with a color wheel that has, every color in the rainbow readily accessible to you. You don't have to pick a gel. Well, we only have this blue and we don't have that blue. And it's really a fun time to be a filmmaker, I think.
Well, and I feel like you need to make sure that you have your do it on the weekends roots. Because if you look at even something that's in Dr. Sleep that I was floored by, a shot that I assumed was a gimbal shot, it's where Ewan McGregor goes onto the wall and it, does the Flanagan 90-degree turn thing.
Yep.
And I assumed that was a gimbal shot, but no, it was literally, they just moved him over the wall, turned the camera, and then shook it a little bit, and that was it. And it's like, that's some 1960s Star Trek stuff, and it still works.
Absolutely. So, I'm a huge proponent of lo-fi. Like, I can't tell you how many times I've been pushed down a hallway on a skateboard and it looks like a techno crane shot. Or
yeah,
I've always say it doesn't matter what's happening behind the camera, it matters what's happening on screen. And sometimes that's the most creative shot, is figuring out how to do something in a very lo-fi way on the day. Or oftentimes producers don't, we need to get a 3-axis head, and it's like they don't want to pay for it. And it's not in the budget. And so, all right, so how are we going to do it? Well, we're just going to get an L plate, mount the camera that way, take the sticks as far as they go, shorten one stick, and then 3, 2, 1, boom, and we have a 90-degree move. And like, I've done it quite a few times with Mike, and I think it's one of the signature things. And I've taken it on to other sets with me as well. And it's again, doesn't have to be like the most expensive thing, and it just has to work on screen.
It's why I'm surprised that Evil Dead 2 isn't taught in film school, as this is really valuable stuff that you will actually use, as opposed to, you have to read the William Goldman books, you have to go through that kind of stuff. I get that, but really something like that is the kind of filmmaking you need to learn and practice, and then all the other stuff you can work your way up to.
Absolutely, down and dirty. Time and money is the most important consideration, and if you can figure out a way to do it fast and cheap, you're in.
That's it. That's it, man.
It really is true, that adage, good, fast, cheap, pick two. And I think that if you're creative, that's part of the creative process, is figuring out how to achieve those things in a really lo-fi way. Well, yeah, it's fun.
I'm so excited for whatever you got coming up next, because looking through your IMDb, it's just going through some of my favorite things that I've seen in the last 15 years, as I was saying. And I hope I get to chat with you again, because man, yeah, I could do this for hours with you, just going through your work. So
me too.
You've done some great stuff. So
thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, I'm hoping for a romantic comedy. No, I'm totally kidding.
Why not? Why not?
No, I'm kind of like, if I could curate my career, I would like to move into things that have just a little bit more action. Like, I'm a huge fan of like the John Wicks and the Bourne Identities and Ronin and those kind of things. I also really love period.
Ronin is an underrated film. I honestly feel like that's the best car chase film to me.
It's one of my favorite films, and it was done before we have a lot of this technology too. Like, it was, Italian Job, that was pretty cool car chase stuff. I also love this movie that I reference all the time, Atomic Blonde, which I just am
Oh
stunned
yeah,
by
yeah,
the
yeah.
writing
Great
in
little
it.
movie. Yeah, the
Yeah,
stuff on the wire when she goes down from one floor to the other. I mean, just man, that's some really inventive, cool action. So
absolutely. And it's like that ride, it's a ride of a movie. And it's like, oh, it's over. Wow, that was fast. And you didn't stop staring at the screen the whole time. But that's kind of where I would hope to go. But
nice.
we'll see.
That's great to hear because you don't hear that often that people are wanting to head to that direction, because it's another one of those areas where the artistry is often ignored. I feel
Mm,
like where it's not recognized in the way that it needs to be. That it's just there's work that is of the highest caliber that happens in action films that
oh
just
my
doesn't get
gosh.
the recognition it deserves.
The planning, and now with safety being super paramount in terms of
Clearly, yeah.
everything, and what it takes as a team to plan and choreograph and orchestrate that stuff is, some of the stunt coordinators, you'll see a lot of like stunt coordinators become directors, because it takes a really, really innate knowledge and experience to know how to shape those scenes in tiny pieces, because you can't do the whole thing all in one thing. So it's definitely, parts is parts. And you kind of have to pre-visualize those and understand what works and what doesn't with the camera in concert with the stunt people and the actors, and what you can double with somebody, what you can't, and how to shoot all that with continuity. Like it's it's a matrix for sure.
Oh yeah, and I'll just kind of leave it on this because I think it's something that just always sticks with me. Godfather is pretty much a near perfect film, and in my estimation, the reason it's not a perfect film is because of bad stunt coordination. Where
Mm,
there's just a really bad fight sequence in that movie that's clearly 2 feet off where the punch is thrown and the garbage
right,
can is thrown
right,
down, and it's something you look at and you just kind of giggle at this point. It's charming in that sense now because it's
right.
so off, but it's something that yeah, you have to focus on those things and know what you're doing in those moments, because if it doesn't land, that really you don't want people laughing for those reasons.
Well, and at the end of the day, now we're so much more sophisticated as viewers, I think. And
It's
it is
true.
easy to forget that and let it go. But now there's been so many amazing film, so much amazing film work that we expect the best. It's